Have you ever felt invisible, like your hardest work, your most profound insights, were merely whispers lost in a storm of louder, less substantial voices? Imagine pouring your very soul into something, a creation meticulously crafted, only for it to be dismissed, ridiculed, as if your very presence was an inconvenience. This is not merely a story of corporate ambition, but a profound reflection on the silent battles fought by those who choose substance over spectacle, truth over convenience. It begins in the gleaming, yet often unseeing, towers of Dusseldorf, where the hum of financial markets drowns out the quiet brilliance of individuals like Ricarda Feldman. Ricarda was a financial analyst, 30 years old, her mind a finely tuned instrument for dissecting complex data, her intuition a silent compass in the chaotic seas of market speculation. For weeks, she had been a ghost in the office, fueled by lukewarm coffee and an unwavering dedication to her craft, meticulously compiling a risk assessment report for an impending, monumental merger. Every graph, every projection, every line of her analysis was not just data, it was a testament to her foresight, her understanding of the delicate ecosystem of finance. Her desk, usually cluttered with market reports, was now an ordered fortress of research, each document a brick in the wall of truth she was building. She understood the intricacies, the hidden pitfalls, the subtle tremors that could unravel even the most robust deals. Her work was her voice, a language of numbers and logic that, in her mind, spoke for itself. Yet, in the bustling corridors of her firm, a place where perception often outweighed reality, Ricarda remained largely unseen. She moved through the open-plan office with a quiet efficiency, her brown hair often pulled back in a simple ponytail, her focus so intense it often made her appear aloof. She was not one for the grand gestures or the loud pronouncements that characterized many of her male counterparts. Her confidence resided in her competence, not in her volume. She believed, perhaps naively, that the merit of her work would be its loudest advocate. Her immediate superior, Jürgen, was the antithesis of Ricarda's quiet integrity. Jürgen was a man built for the boardroom stage, a master of performative confidence and strategic self-promotion. His suits were always impeccably tailored, his laugh booming, his opinions delivered with an air of unshakable authority, even when he hadn't done his homework. He thrived on the superficial, on the quick win, on the appearance of being in control. He saw Ricarda not as a valuable asset, but as a diligent cog in his machine, someone to produce the raw material he could then polish and present as his own. He was oblivious to the depth of her understanding, dismissing her cautious nature as timidity, her thoroughness as overthinking. He valued speed and flash, not the quiet, painstaking excavation of truth. The upcoming executive meeting was Jurgen's moment to shine, a high-stakes presentation that would either solidify his standing or expose his vulnerabilities. He saw Ricarda's report as a mere stepping stone, a foundation upon which he would build his edifice of grandeur. He had skimmed her conclusions, nodded vaguely at her charts, and made a few perfunctory suggestions, never truly engaging with the profound implications she had unearthed. Ricarda, meanwhile, prepared not for a performance, but for an unveiling. She believed in the power of evidence, in the undeniable force of objective truth. She polished her slides, rehearsed her explanations, her heart thrumming with a silent anticipation that her work would finally speak, not just for her, but for the company's future. She held a quiet hope that in the clarity of her data, others would see the wisdom she had woven into every single page. This was more than a report. It was a warning, a safeguard, a quiet plea for foresight in a world too often driven by blind ambition. The air in the executive boardroom was thick with anticipation, the polished mahogany table reflecting the anxious faces of senior management. Ricarda sat poised, her meticulously prepared presentation glowing on the large screen, a beacon of clarity amidst the usual corporate jargon. When her turn came, she spoke with a quiet authority, her voice steady as she laid out the complex web of financial risks, each point supported by irrefutable data, her tone earnest and devoid of theatrics. She detailed the hidden liabilities, the potential market shifts, the subtle vulnerabilities that, if ignored, could turn a promising merger into a catastrophic burden. Her eyes, usually downcast, met those of the CFO, a flicker of hope in their depths that her warnings would be heard. She spoke not just of numbers, but of the very foundations of the company's future. But before she could elaborate on her crucial mitigation strategies, Jurgen, seated beside her, cleared his throat with exaggerated impatience. His hand, heavy and dismissive, sliced through the air, cutting her off mid-sentence. A wave of coldness washed over Ricarda as Jurgen's booming voice filled the room, overriding her quiet sincerity. He began to twist her carefully constructed narrative, reinterpreting her cautious analysis as overly pessimistic, her meticulous research as excessive caution. He mocked her conclusions with a theatrical sigh, a performative rolling of his eyes that elicited a few nervous chuckles from the less discerning executives. Ricarda here has, shall we say, a very creative imagination when it comes to worst-case scenarios, he declared, a condescending smirk plastered across his face. He waved a dismissive hand at her most critical slide, filled with stark, urgent warnings. While we appreciate her thoroughness, sometimes one must simply trust the market, eh? We cannot let fear dictate our vision. This merger is about boldness, not timidity. The words hung in the air, a public humiliation that stung far more than a direct insult. It wasn't just her work he was dismissing, it was her very discernment, her intellectual rigor, her core understanding of her profession. The weight of his condescension felt like a physical blow, pressing down on her shoulders. Her jaw tightened imperceptibly, but she said nothing. Her gaze, which had briefly flickered to the faces of the other executives, saw only polite indifference, or worse, a subtle agreement with Jurgen's bluster. No one spoke up, no one challenged him. The collective silence of the room was as deafening as Jurgen's arrogance. Ricarda felt the familiar chill of invisibility creep over her, the profound ache of being overlooked, reduced to a mere appendage of her manager's ego. She watched as Jurgen then smoothly transitioned, taking her key findings, rephrasing them with a false bravado, presenting them as his own original insights, cleverly omitting the nuances and the critical warnings she had so carefully included. He painted a rosy picture, a frictionless path to profit, ignoring every single obstacle she had meticulously highlighted. Her risk assessment, designed to be a shield, was being repurposed as a mere footnote in his narrative of boundless optimism. A bitter taste filled her mouth, but she maintained her composure, her face a mask of professional neutrality. Internally, however, a quiet fire began to kindle. It wasn't anger, not the kind that flares and consumes, but a cold, steady determination. She would not allow her truth to be twisted, not when the stakes were so high for the company she served. She understood then that some truths, the most important ones, cannot be shouted. They must be delivered with precision, to the right ears, at the right moment. The meeting ended with Jurgen receiving pats on the back, accolades for his visionary outlook, while Ricarda gathered her papers in silence, her presence barely acknowledged. As she walked back to her desk, the vibrant energy of the office felt hollow, the corporate hum a monotonous drone. But beneath the surface of her quiet exterior, a decision was hardening, a resolve that would soon ripple through the very foundations of the firm. She refused to be a casualty of professional vanity. Her work, her truth, deserved to be seen. The fluorescent hum of the office felt oppressive as Ricarda returned to her desk, the echoes of Jurgen's dismissive laughter still ringing in her ears. The public humiliation had left a bitter taste, but it had also ignited a quiet, unyielding resolve. Her fingers, usually nimble across the keyboard, paused over the cold plastic, her mind racing. The standard protocol was clear: report through your manager. But Jurgen had proven himself a barrier, not a conduit. He had not only ignored her warnings, he had actively distorted them, prioritizing his own fragile ego over the company's very solvency. The stakes were too high for her to simply walk away, to let her foresight be buried under a mountain of hubris. She thought of the countless hours she had poured into the report, the late nights spent cross-referencing data, the moments of stark clarity when the true risks had revealed themselves. This wasn't just a document. It was a testament to her professional integrity, a silent plea for prudence. Her integrity demanded a response, but not one of public defiance. Retaliation in the boardroom would only have fueled Zhu Rugen's narrative, painting her as insubordinate or emotional. Ricarda knew her strength lay not in overt confrontation, but in the undeniable power of her data. She opened her email client, her heart thrumming a steady rhythm against her ribs. Her gaze fell upon the recipient field, her mind settling on a name she rarely interacted with, Mr. Elias Thorne, the chief financial officer. Thorne was a formidable figure, known for his sharp intellect and his demanding, almost intimidating, presence. He was a man of facts, of figures, of unvarnished truth, a stark contrast to Jurgen's polished platitudes. Bypassing Jurgen was an audacious move, a direct challenge to the established hierarchy. It was a risk, perhaps even a career-ending one if it backfired. But the alternative, allowing a potential catastrophe to unfold due to negligence and ego, was unthinkable. Ricarda took a deep breath, the chill of fear momentarily competing with the warmth of her conviction. She attached the full, unedited risk assessment report, the very document Jurgen had dismissed. Then she composed a brief, concise email. No emotion, no accusations, no complaints about Jurgen. Just the unadorned truth. She typed, her fingers steady. Please find attached the comprehensive risk assessment report for the upcoming merger. I believe the full analysis, including original projections and data, offers a deeper insight into potential liabilities that warrant your direct review. She reread it twice, ensuring every word was precise, professional, and devoid of any personal agenda. It wasn't about her, it was about the integrity of the work, the potential impact on the company. With a final, decisive click, she sent the email. The digital envelope vanished into the corporate ether, carrying with it not just a report, but a silent declaration of war against mediocrity and pretense. A strange calm settled over her. She had done what she believed was right, what her conscience demanded. The outcome was now beyond her control, in the hands of a man who valued substance over show. The next morning, the corporate hum felt heavier, laden with unspoken possibilities. Ricarda arrived at her desk early, the quiet anticipation, a palpable weight in the air. She tried to immerse herself in her routine tasks, but her eyes kept straying to her inbox. Then, a notification. A new email. Her heart gave a sudden lurch. The sender, Elias Thorne, CFO. The subject line, Merger Risk Assessment. She clicked it open, her breath catching in her throat. The message was brief, stark, yet intensely direct. Ricarda, your report is insightful. Let's discuss this privately. Leave him out. The words were a lifeline, a validation, a silent acknowledgement that her truth had found its way through the noise. A wave of profound relief washed over her, followed by a surge of cautious optimism. The seed had been planted. Now she would wait for it to grow. The game was truly on, and she had just made her first, decisive move. The CFO's office was a sanctuary of austere power, the city skyline framed by floor-to-ceiling windows, making Ricarda's own desk seem a world away. Elias Thorne sat behind his vast, uncluttered desk, his gaze piercing, his posture exuding an almost intimidating authority. When his email had landed in Ricarda's inbox, a cold thrill had run through her. Leave him out. It was a clear signal. He saw the situation. He recognized the undercurrents. But the meeting itself was a different proposition. Thorne had a reputation for being ruthless in his pursuit of truth, for peeling back layers of corporate jargon to expose the raw data beneath. Ricarda, usually so composed, felt a tremor of nerves. Yet, a deeper current of resolve flowed through her. This was her chance, not just to defend her work, but to demonstrate her inherent value. Take a seat, Ricarda. Thorne's voice was deep, resonant, betraying no emotion. He gestured to the leather chair opposite him, a stack of papers, her report, neatly placed on the corner of his desk. Ricarda sat, her spine straight, her hands clasped loosely in her lap. Thorne leaned back, his eyes narrowing slightly as he regarded her. Your report, he began, his voice slow and deliberate, is comprehensive. More so than what was presented in yesterday's meeting. He paused, letting the implication hang in the air. Walk me through it. The parts Jurgen conveniently glossed over. Ricarda felt a surge of quiet confidence. This was her domain. She didn't need theatrics here. She spoke clearly, concisely, her voice steady and calm, explaining the intricate financial models, the statistical anomalies, the macroeconomic shifts she had factored in. She detailed the specific clauses in the merger agreement that held hidden liabilities, the subtle market indicators that pointed to potential downturns, the vulnerabilities in the supply chain that could unravel the entire deal. Her language was precise, her arguments logical, her passion for accuracy palpable. She didn't exaggerate or sensationalize, she simply laid out the facts, cold and irrefutable. She referenced specific data points, quoted expert analyses, and demonstrated the rigorous methodology behind every single one of her projections. There was no hint of personal vendetta, no complaint about Jurgen. Her focus was entirely on the data, on the truth. Thorne listened intently, his expression unreadable, occasionally interjecting with sharp, incisive questions. Show me the stress test for that scenario. What if the interest rates climb by 0.5 point? Have you accounted for that? What's the probability distribution on that particular risk factor? Ricarda answered each question without hesitation, her knowledge of the report absolute, her understanding of the financial landscape profound. She could anticipate his questions, offering additional insights before he even asked. She explained how she had built in contingencies, how her models accounted for volatility, how her recommendations were not about stopping the merger, but about fortifying it against predictable dangers. As she spoke, a subtle shift occurred in Thorne's demeanor. The initial skepticism, the air of detached authority, began to soften, replaced by a growing respect. He leaned forward, his elbows resting on the desk, his eyes now fixed on her with genuine interest. He saw beyond the junior analyst, beyond the quiet demeanor. He saw the sharp mind, the unwavering dedication, the rare ability to see patterns where others saw only chaos. He saw the substance that Jurgen had so carelessly dismissed. Your analysis regarding the supplier contracts. Thorne finally said, leaning back again, a faint note of surprise in his voice. That was completely omitted yesterday, and it is, frankly, critical. A potential landmine. He tapped his fingers on the pristine report. Jurgen presented a very different picture, a far less nuanced one. Ricarda met his gaze, her expression unyielding. My aim, Mr. Thorne, was to present a complete and honest assessment. Not just the appealing prospects, but the hidden challenges. A thorough understanding of risk allows for proactive mitigation, strengthening the overall strategy. Thorne nodded slowly, a thoughtful expression on his face. He finally understood the dramatic irony of the situation. The man who had loudly proclaimed his boldness had chosen to ignore the very truths that would protect the company, while the quiet analyst, dismissed as timid, had offered the most pragmatic path forward. He saw the courage it took for her to bypass the corporate ladder, to risk her standing to ensure the truth was heard. He saw not just her talent, but her moral fortitude. The meeting concluded not with a decision, but with a palpable shift in dynamics. Thorne's final words were delivered with a new tone, one of quiet acknowledgement. Thank you, Ricarda. You may go. We will be in touch. Ricarda left the office, the city lights twinkling outside the windows, a feeling of deep satisfaction blossoming within her. She had been seen. Her voice, through her work, had finally been heard by the right person. The seed of truth, sown in defiance, was beginning to sprout. Days bled into a week, then two. The office atmosphere, for Ricarda, was fraught with a silent tension. She continued her routine, but beneath the surface, a quiet expectation hummed. Had she done enough? Had Thorne truly understood the depth of the implications? Jurgen, blissfully unaware of the seismic shift occurring beneath his feet, continued to strut, his confidence seemingly unshaken. He would occasionally throw a condescending glance Ricarda's way, a subtle reminder of her place, a flicker of his assumed superiority. Ricarda merely met his gaze with a serene, almost unreadable expression. Then the email arrived. It was from Human Resources, CC'd to Elias Thorne himself. Ricarda stared at the subject line. Reassignment to Executive Strategy Team, Ricarda Feldman. Her heart leaped. Reassignment, Executive Strategy Team. The words pulsed on the screen, a validation far beyond anything she had dared to hope for. It wasn't just a promotion, it was a complete recalibration of her professional trajectory. It was a clear, unequivocal statement of value. The notice was brief, formal, detailing her new responsibilities, her reporting line now directly to Thorne. It outlined her new office location, a floor higher, closer to the executive suite. There was no fanfare, no public announcement. The company often preferred quiet transitions, especially when they involved a delicate reshuffling of power. Ricarda felt a wave of relief, followed by a surge of empowering energy. The overlooked virtuoso was finally stepping into the light, not by demanding it, but by the sheer undeniable force of her talent. She printed the email, a quiet smile gracing her lips. Her internal world felt like sunshine after a long, gray spell. The next morning, as Ricarda began to pack the few personal items from her desk, a small potted plant, a framed photo of her family, a well-worn coffee mug, the first ripple of change began to spread. Colleagues, initially oblivious, started to notice. Her cubicle, usually so unassuming, was now the center of hushed whispers. Some approached her with cautious congratulations, their eyes wide with curiosity. Others, particularly those closer to Jurgen's orbit, cast furtive, uncertain glances. Jurgen himself was one of the last to fully grasp the shift. He initially dismissed Ricarda's packing as preparations for a vacation, perhaps a temporary project. But as he saw her collecting her belongings, as he overheard the hushed congratulations, a flicker of unease crossed his face. He approached her desk, a forced smile on his lips. "Ricarda? What's all this, then? Moving desks?" His voice, usually so confident, had a slight tremor. Ricarda met his gaze, her expression calm, devoid of triumph or malice. "Yes, Jurgen. I've been reassigned to the executive strategy team, reporting directly to Mr. Thorne." The words landed like a quiet bomb. Jurgen's forced smile faltered, replaced by a look of bewildered shock, then dawning realization. His jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing as he finally understood the profound implications. The quiet analyst, the one he had publicly ridiculed, had not just moved up. She had bypassed him entirely, ascending to a position of direct influence with the CFO. The man who had dismissed her work was now, irrevocably, outranked by her. He muttered something incoherent, a strained, half-formed congratulations, and retreated, his usual swagger replaced by a noticeable slump in his shoulders. The dramatic irony was palpable, a silent testament to the power of overlooked talent. While Ricarda's star was rising, Jurgen's began its quiet descent. His initial surprise quickly morphed into a simmering resentment, then a growing anxiety. He knew, instinctively, that this shift was not just about Ricarda's advancement, it was about his own diminishing power, his own increasingly visible irrelevance in the face of true competence. The office landscape began to subtly rearrange itself. The hum of the financial markets continued, but now, a new, quieter melody was beginning to play the sound of true merit, finally finding its voice, heard at last. Ricarda's new office was modest, yet it felt like a world away from the anonymity of the open-plan floor below. The view of Dusseldorf's skyline, previously just a distant backdrop, now felt closer, more tangible, a reflection of her newfound proximity to the strategic decisions shaping the company's future. The atmosphere was different too, hushed, focused, permeated by an air of serious intent. Here, ideas were debated, not dismissed, insights were valued, not mocked. It was a space where intellect was paramount, and Ricarda, for the first time, felt truly at home. Her initial days on the executive strategy team were a whirlwind of new responsibilities, complex projects, and high-level discussions. She quickly demonstrated that her meticulous risk assessment report was not a fluke, but a true representation of her analytical prowess. Her quiet confidence, once mistaken for timidity, was now recognized as thoughtful deliberation. Her insights were sharp, her contributions incisive, and her ability to foresee potential problems became an invaluable asset. She wasn't just preparing reports anymore, she was actively shaping strategy, her voice resonating in meetings where, just weeks prior, she had been cut off. Elias Thorne, the CFO, proved to be an exacting but fair mentor. He pushed her, challenged her assumptions, but always with the underlying respect for her capabilities. He valued her ability to cut through the noise, to present unvarnished truth, even when it was uncomfortable. He saw her as a strategic partner, not a subordinate, and fostered an environment where her ideas could truly flourish. Ricarda thrived in this new environment. The burden of invisibility lifted, she felt a profound sense of empowerment. Her creativity, once stifled, began to blossom. She proposed innovative solutions to long-standing financial challenges, developed new methodologies for market analysis, and helped identify emerging opportunities that others had overlooked. The subtle nuances of her original report, the very points Jurgen had ridiculed, now formed the basis for critical discussions and strategic pivots. Meanwhile, Jurgen's world began to unravel. His once booming laugh became less frequent, his swagger less pronounced. The spotlight he once hogged began to dim, leaving him increasingly in the shadows. With Ricarda no longer directly reporting to him, and her new position clearly outranking his influence waned dramatically. Senior management, now privy to Ricarda's true capabilities through Thorne's advocacy, began to see Jurgen for what he truly was, a man of superficiality, more concerned with appearance than with substance. His errors, once overshadowed by his bluster, became increasingly evident. Projects he had enthusiastically championed, based on his bold vision, but lacking Ricarda's rigorous risk assessment, began to encounter the very pitfalls she had warned against. There was no dramatic firing, no public shaming. Instead, Jurgen was quietly, subtly pushed out of the spotlight. His responsibilities were gradually diminished, his participation in high-level meetings became less frequent, and his once powerful voice in the boardroom was increasingly ignored. He was moved to a less significant department, his grand office replaced by a smaller, more isolated one. He became the corporate equivalent of a fading echo, a cautionary tale whispered in hushed tones, a poignant example of how easily competence can be overshadowed by arrogance and how swiftly the tables can turn. He was left with the hollow shell of his former authority, his pride wounded, his future uncertain. Ricarda, however, focused on her work, not on Jurgen's quiet demise. She found satisfaction not in his downfall, but in the vindication of her own truth, in the tangible impact she was now able to make. The contrast between their fates served as a stark reminder to everyone in the company. Genuine merit, though sometimes hidden, would ultimately find its way to the surface, championed by those perceptive enough to recognize it. The silence that had once defined Ricarda, the silence that had allowed her to be overlooked, was now filled with the hum of purpose, the quiet resonance of her true potential finally unleashed. The true test of Ricarda's foresight, and the ultimate validation of her integrity, arrived with a chilling precision. Months after the merger had been finalized, and well after Ricarda had settled into her pivotal role on the executive strategy team, the very market risks she had so meticulously detailed in her original report began to materialize. A key supplier, whose precarious financial health Ricarda had extensively documented and whose contractual vulnerabilities she had highlighted, suddenly announced bankruptcy. The news sent shockwaves through the industry, threatening to cripple the newly merged entity's supply chain and incur massive, unforeseen penalties. Panic began to ripple through the lower ranks of management, quickly escalating to the executive suite. Elias Thorne, however, remained remarkably calm. He called an emergency meeting, his gaze sweeping over the anxious faces of the senior team. "Ricarda," he said, his voice cutting through the rising tension, "your original risk assessment. The section on supplier stability, specifically global tech solutions. Can you remind us of your analysis?" All eyes turned to Ricarda, who sat calmly, her posture composed, a faint, almost imperceptible air of vindication about her. She retrieved a digital copy of her original report, the very one Jurgen had dismissed. With quiet authority, she projected the specific slides, the charts, the data she had compiled months ago. Her voice was clear and steady as she reiterated her warnings, now imbued with the undeniable weight of dramatic irony. She detailed the specific clauses in Global Tech Solutions' contract that allowed for their unilateral termination without severe penalty, the financial metrics that had pointed to their impending insolvency, and the contingency plans she had meticulously outlined to mitigate such an event. Based on this analysis, she explained, gesturing to a complex flowchart, we developed a three-tiered mitigation strategy. The first tier involves activating our secondary supplier, Innovate Systems, whose contracts we renegotiated and diversified 6 weeks ago, anticipating this very scenario. The second tier involves leveraging our existing warehousing network to bridge any short-term gaps. And the third, a new agreement with Pioneer Logistics for immediate distribution, which was finalized just last week. A stunned silence fell over the room. The comprehensive nature of her foresight, the proactive steps taken months in advance, was breathtaking. Thorne, his eyes alight with admiration, interjected, "Ricarda's analysis, as you can see, allowed us to anticipate this crisis with unprecedented clarity. Her recommendations, initially dismissed by some." He paused, his gaze subtly shifting towards the empty seat where Jurgen would typically have been, "were acted upon by the executive strategy team under my direction. As a result, while this is a significant challenge, it is not a catastrophic blow. We are prepared." The relief in the room was palpable, a collective exhalation. The crisis, which could have derailed the entire merger and cost the company hundreds of millions, was now manageable. Ricarda's foresight had not merely saved the company, it had cemented her reputation, transforming her from an overlooked analyst into an indispensable visionary. Later that day, Thorne called Ricarda into his office. He didn't need to say much. His expression, a mixture of gratitude and profound respect, spoke volumes. "Ricarda," he began, his voice laced with genuine emotion, "you saved us. You saw what no one else did, and you had the courage to ensure that truth was heard. Your work is not just valuable, it is essential. You are essential." Ricarda felt a warmth spread through her, a profound sense of catharsis. It wasn't about the accolades or the prestige. It was about the validation of her intuition, the recognition of her dedication, the undeniable triumph of substance over superficiality. Her journey from obscurity and underestimation had culminated in a moment of undeniable public recognition. The hidden gem had not only been discovered, but had proven its priceless worth, becoming a catalyst for positive change in the very environment that had once sought to diminish her. Ricarda Feldman, once a whisper in the corporate cacophony, now stood tall, her voice respected, her insights sought after. The company, through the direct influence of Elias Thorne and Ricarda's undeniable talent, began to undergo a subtle but profound cultural shift. The emphasis moved away from flashy presentations and loud, baseless pronouncements towards meticulous data, thoughtful analysis, and genuine foresight. The value of true expertise, however quietly delivered, began to take precedence over performative showmanship. Ricarda became a living testament to the power of unseen potential, a beacon for others who often felt marginalized or overlooked. She mentored junior analysts, encouraging them to trust their instincts, to delve deeper, and to always prioritize truth over convenience. Her story became a quiet legend within the firm, a reminder that integrity, diligence, and unwavering competence would eventually, inevitably, find their deserved recognition. Jurgen, on the other hand, faded entirely. He was quietly let go a few months after the supplier crisis, his brand of shallow confidence no longer tolerated in a company that had learned a painful, yet ultimately beneficial, lesson. His departure served as a stark, unspoken warning to others who might attempt to build their careers on the backs of others, or by dismissing the very truths that could save them. His arc concluded not in redemption, but in irrelevance, reinforcing the story's theme of merit over prejudice. Ricarda's empowerment was complete. She continued to ascend, her career trajectory driven by her unwavering commitment to excellence, transforming her not only into a leader in her field, but also into an advocate for a more meritocratic, more humane corporate world. She proved that the quiet brilliance of the overlooked can, and often does, save the day. The company learned to look beyond the obvious, to listen to the softest voices, and to understand that true strength often resides in the most unassuming places. The lessons resonated beyond the boardroom, touching the lives of countless individuals who yearned for their worth to be seen. So, what is the profound truth this story unveils? It is simply this: true value is not always the loudest voice in the room. It is often the quiet conviction, the meticulous detail, the unwavering integrity of those who choose substance over spectacle. It is the hidden gem, patiently polished by dedication, waiting to be discovered. This story reminds us that every single person holds untapped potential, a unique brilliance that, if given the chance, can illuminate the path forward, not just for themselves, but for entire organizations, for communities, for the world. It is a call to look beyond the surface, to challenge our preconceptions, and to recognize that the most impactful contributions often come from the most unexpected sources. Never underestimate the power of the quiet one, the one who does the work without needing the applause, the one who possesses the courage to speak their truth, even when their voice trembles. Because ultimately, truth has a way of revealing itself, and those who stand by it, those who nurture it, will always, in the end, prevail. Do you know someone who feels overlooked, whose brilliance is yet to be fully seen? Share this story with them, or better yet, take a moment today to truly see someone in your own life who works diligently, quietly, without demanding recognition. Remind them, and yourself, that the most profound impacts are often forged in the crucible of quiet conviction. Your recognition could be the catalyst for someone else's extraordinary transformation.